Now that the business is out of the way, I got to tell you, I mean, Acapulco was so much fun for a variety of reasons, but in part because of the people that I met. And I think on night one, Dennis and I met, and I knew right away, oh, we're going to be friends, and we definitely need to talk. So joining us from an Irishman from Australia, insert drinking jokes there. He is the founder of Awakening and Health. It's Dennis O'Connor, everybody. Good to see you, Dennis. How are you?
Charlie, good to see you again, mate. I think you're on the money. It was just such a wonderful, loving experience. Just everybody on the same page over there. And I was telling you just before we jumped on, just meeting up with one of the local groups here, a Common Law group. And, I had another radio interview actually here as well. And the theme was about anarchists. And, it was just about breaking down this idea of, the bottle throwing crazy people running around destroying stuff. And I mean, what a dichotomy, just getting over there and finding just these beautiful, sane, loving people aware of what's going on in the world and just wanting to do something about it, motivated to just combine forces against tyranny. So I mean I love almost that idea of anarchy, but then then having to explain that reality, it makes people think. But meeting people like yourself and numerous others over there, I'm still on a little bit of a buzz about that.
Yeah, well, we have this in this picture. Even during my presentation, I was saying, like, the first time I came, I was like, "Oh, excuse me, when is the Molotov cocktail throwing contest going on?" They're like, "No, we don't do that here. That's Antifa."
Yeah.
That's those morons that can't even. They're so weak they can't even overhand their Molotov cocktails. But yeah, the Anarchapulco conference is I think people get caught off guard when they come there. They're like, okay, I'm expecting all of this chaos and insanity and crazy people, and it's just not that. It's just the opposite of that. It's a bunch of people that are really thinking, that have their heads screwed on, that are looking to build parallel systems, get outside of this current paradigm. And that's why when you and I met, I was like, oh yeah, we talked about health for like hours, and all of this. And you have so many tips, and you this is what you do, and you've been doing this for a long, long time. And I decided, well, I got to get you on to talk about a variety of things. But you said something, I think you said it on more than one occasion, and it totally rang true for me. When I heard you say it, it stuck. You said, any conversation that you have about health that doesn't involve talking about atrazine, you're not having the real conversation. So I said, let's start with that. Let's talk about this. What is this chemical? I only knew it as Alex Jones are turning the frogs gay and everything. And everyone went, oh, you crazy lunatic. They're not turning the frogs gay. It's like, well, yeah, they're turning them into hermaphrodites. If you consider that turning the frogs gay, that's not good. And then we go down this path and we go, well, okay, we've got gender bending chemicals that are found in drinking water and plastic bottles and all these things. And you go, maybe there is something to this whole trans agenda. Maybe they're being chemically bombarded and have been since they were babies. And maybe we've got some real problems that aren't going to be solved with psychotherapy. Talk to me about atrazine. What is this, and why do we need to be aware of it?
Well, listen, what I'll do is I'll get to that point first. But it just reminds me of a little bit of an anecdote, which I tell a lot of people. So my background was in intensive care nursing. So I did that for about 10 plus years. And during that, I also did a reasonable bit of psychiatry stuff in the middle. Mm-hmm. And then I left mainstream kind of health for a load of different reasons, indirectly related to some of the stuff we're seeing now. Just that very, very toxic kind of environment, working with people who are, I guess, really encaged in these very narrow paradigms. And I actually ended up being a dive instructor and doing a few other things as well.
Nice.
Then I got back into mainstream health, but I wanted to move out of what I considered was clinical stuff, which is like all that intensive care body stuff. And I thought I'd gear towards doing some of the mind stuff. So I found myself in what we call acute care settings. So that's the really serious stuff, people hanging themselves, acute schizophrenia, you name it, that real pinnacle stuff. I ended up doing drug and alcohol type things, running indigenous alcohol groups and lots of various things. And then the last area I went to was a thing called the acute care team, which was the really pointy stuff. I used to have to work with police, go out into the communities, pick people up who were trying to kill themselves, disarm people. It was fairly full on actually. But when I first got to that area, my comment was to a lot of my peers, and this happened 3 times. This is, you can't make this up. When I got there, I was saying, listen, why I thought I was the new guy walking in there, gonna learn all this great stuff and add to my knowledge and whatnot. And I was asking a question: why are we not looking at gut health? And I had one person who was meant to be, somebody I was learning from, say to me, why? What do you mean by that? I'm going, because of serotonin. And they're going, what about serotonin? And I'm going, because it's produced in your stomach. And they're going, no, it's not. This bear in mind is about 7 years ago. And I'm going, yeah, it is. And they've pulled out a chair, jumped into the chair, opened up Google, and furiously tapped these keys. And they've gone, oh, I never knew that. And I had almost exactly the same thing happen 3 times. So my first little experience there, I'm thinking something is broken in this system. Something is fairly wrong. And this is fairly relevant. So serotonin is the chemical, and even there's papers about this that are actually a little bit ambiguous. But let's say it's the chemical predominantly associated with happiness, and that's more or less, that's okay to say that, even though there's a few caveats on that. We have this chemical that's being produced in our stomachs. Okay, now we've got 2 things, which are glyphosate and atrazine. Glyphosate's Roundup. Australia happens to be per capita one of the biggest buyers of Roundup in the world. It's hideous.
God.
It's getting sprayed everywhere. And the reason it's safe, and I love the way they twist everything. The reason it's safe in humans is because what it does is it interferes with what we call, this is why it's called glyphosate. It interferes with things called glycine pathways. And it also interferes with things called shikimate pathways, which are in plants. So because we're not plant-based, it's safe for us. Okay. Apart from the fact it's absolutely blatantly not.
Right.
The little thing that people seem to miss is the fact that the what we call the microbiome, or the gut flora in our stomachs, is plant-based. So we got a plant-based microbiome in our stomachs, and we are, if we're eating sprayed food, adding this thing called Roundup, which is a weed killer, into our stomachs, and we're killing the really, really important flora in our stomachs. So it's a massive reason for huge amounts of illness. If anybody wants to look at more into detail, one of the best people on this is Stephanie Seneff. She's absolutely fantastic. And even if you believe 5% of what she says, you'll run for the hills with this glyphosate. So the glyphosate is the thing that they use for the weeds. It's essentially weed killer, and they spray this in hundreds and hundreds of metric tons and liters all around Australia. It's all around America, Brazil, you name it. Our food is absolutely poisoned. So that only takes care of the weeds, but then they got to take care of the pests, the insects. Okay, and the insects, this is where atrazine comes into the mix. And atrazine, as you absolutely quite rightly pointed out, is a hormone disruptor. So what it does is it kills these pathways that in insects, apart from their ability to reproduce. And the meme is Alex saying it turns the frogs gay. There was a paper where essentially when atrazine was given in, and from memory, I might be wrong about this, but I'll throw it out there and somebody can write in and correct me. But I seem to think that atrazine in highish doses in water didn't affect frogs, but when they diluted it severely, it actually turned out that it had severe hormone disrupting mechanisms in frogs, whereby male frogs turned into females and were able to produce eggs.
Wow.
So the intensity of this hormone destructor is absolutely massive. And sorry, I'm kind of going off on a few different ones here, but your opening really throws open this great door of discussion. There's another woman who I stumbled across a few years back. The name will come to me. Gominek, Dr. Gominek. She was a sleep doctor, running sleep clinics for about the last 30 years. Mm-hmm. She had just this incredible hypothesis, which really stuck with me. And I first heard her talk about this probably again about 6-7 years ago, of this shift from what she called pastoral living into urban living. So essentially, we were working outside. We were, in building houses. We were, digging the land. And if you drop down the amount of time now we're spending in outside compared to when what we were doing outside, it is incredibly I mean, we're talking most of the day to now we're working our offices, then we jump in our cars, then we get home, then we're too tired, we go to sleep. And if we're lucky, we're getting out on the weekends. And we've got our children who are basically playing video games all day. The whole light thing is another discussion, which we might get into. But one of the massive things, there's actually a lot of different little tangents to this one. So what we're talking about essentially is a thing called vitamin D, and vitamin D is not a vitamin; it's actually a hormone. A hormone, all a hormone is something that your body makes, and this is where the medical industry loves to, throw out this stuff to confuse us. They want to keep the knowledge to themselves. So this is what I like to do: is I like to break down all this knowledge and deliver it to people easy. Okay, so essentially, the cholesterol is one of the most important things in the world, and it sits under our skin. The sun hits our skin and the cholesterol breaks open and vitamin D is released. Okay, so cholesterol and vitamin D and sunlight are absolutely important. And vitamin D is related to every single hormonal and I guess production mechanism in our bodies, including our hormones, our sexual hormones. And this woman, Gomenak, is hypothesizing that this shift from pastoral living is having a severe detriment on children's hormones. So this is one of the reasons why we're getting now this sexual ambiguity. So you throw in the atrazine, you throw in the plastics and the kind of estrogen mimicking effects that the plastics have. You throw in the sunlight. You throw in other toxicities, you've got a recipe for disaster. And people are shifting towards this psychology aspect of sexuality. Hell no. This is a blatant physical attack on our young people.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, look, when I was a kid, every now and then you would see somebody who was kind of like, what's that? It's Pat, from Saturday Night Live. Kind of maybe a guy, maybe a girl, no big deal. Now it is rampant and it feels kind of like a badge of honor on top of that, sort of like a protected class where you want to be a part of this. And it's a physical, it's clearly something physical because you can look at the person and go, not to be a jerk, but I really don't know which category to put you in. But then there's also this mass psychosis that's taken hold too of these kids where they're very confused about who they are, and now they're talking about how they're cake gendered and a million different things. And I see this, and I must admit I am losing my sympathy and empathy for these people based on on their behavior towards the rest of society. I used to be like, oh, it must be really tough to be born in the wrong body or whatever, one in a million. And now I see it everywhere and I see the behavior that goes along with it. And I must confess, my empathy is just evaporating. And I'm getting to the point now where I'm going, you guys just stay away from me. And I don't like that about me. I don't like that I'm becoming desensitized to this, but it feels like it feels like kind of like it's both a physical manifestation and also just like a trendy thing on top of that. What is this? How does this play in? You mentioned that you're talking about you did work with the psychological component of it, but let's not forget about the physical part. What's driving this? Is this the physical driving the mental, or the mental driving the physical, or what?
It's and this is subjective. So